In the AEC industry, authority speaks a lot louder than advertising.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Donovan Digital Podcast, where we explore smart strategies, tools, and people helping the AEC industry in building product and service companies grow their brand and connect with their target audience. Today, we're diving into something essential but often misunderstood, your website. Whether you're an AEC firm launching a new site or a building product company working to rank higher in Google, there are a number of best practices that should guide your approach. Today, our guest is Michael Schultz, founder of Apex Rush. Michael is a WordPress developer and all-around website and coding wizard. Michael and I have collaborated on many website projects. He and his team help us bring our designs and ideas to life on the web. And today we're going to talk about best practices, common mistakes, and how to keep your site running smoothly. Michael, welcome to the podcast. For those who don't know who you are, can you give us a quick background on yourself and Apex Rush and how you help clients?
Sure. Thank you, Shawn. I appreciate you asking me on here. Yeah, I'm the founder of Apex Rush. And primarily what we do is website maintenance and repair and custom coding. And a huge majority of that is doing WordPress and Elementor development and support. We partner with agencies. We solve tough tech issues. And some of the heavier lifting stuff that we do is site speed optimization and security. And I think that the most important of all of those things is security.
Yeah, I think when you and I first met, we've been working together now, maybe close to a year and a half, 2 years maybe, and which has been great because I knew enough to get in trouble. And so not only have you kind of helped bring me to another level, but really brought in some best practices. And I made a conscious decision a while back to go everything, first of all, WordPress. And for much of our builder, we use Divi, and then we ultimately switched over to Elementor. And we did that with all of our clients. In fact, a bunch of our clients, we didn't even charge you. We said, listen, we want you on this platform. We feel it's the best. And then when we met, you kind of confirmed that as far as the platforms to use when it comes to websites.
Yes, exactly. And Elementor is just a huge step up from those other page builders, in my opinion. They've been for years and years, ever since their inception. It's been bloated. Divi is just a really, really heavy theme / plugin to have on your site, especially when you're doing something on like a corporate level where you need 40 plus plugins. Everything just kind of drags down pretty substantially. And then on top of that, Elementor, all of these page builders tend to be a bit of a learning curve, but I would say Elementor is probably the least friction in that area.
Yeah.
So definitely highly recommend them. And they have some premium plugins as well, and some third-party people offer plugins for Elementor as well that make kind of the whole experience a lot smoother and allow you to do a lot more while installing fewer plugins, which is kind of the biggest goal in WordPress.
Well, I have a lot to get in here with you because I find this topic very interesting. We got into this probably about 10, 12 years ago. We just quite honestly got tired of hiring companies and not really having the ability to go in and change and manage. And it was just kind of, I created a philosophy very early on that I wanted to have a platform that if clients want to get in and add content and manage it, they can. If they want to pay us to do it, they can do that as well. And again, I think both of these platforms offer that to clients. And I know we're kind of the same mindset there. I'd rather kind of teach folks how to go in and fix something if they want to do it themselves, but we're always there to help if they need it. And depending on how complicated it gets, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the beauties of Elementor is it's complex enough for us to be able to go in and do really intricate challenges, but at the same time, if the owner of the website or the help of the company needs to go in there and make a change, it's usually just a couple minutes for them to do that.
Yeah, I used to tell this story all the time when back in the mid 90s, probably before you were born, I worked with Monsanto, and we did our first website. And that website, I think, ranged around 150 to $200,000 to create that website, and we could not touch it. If we had to change a word, we had to pay the website developer. I think at the time it was like $50 an hour to make any changes on the website. I mean, it was almost highway robbery, but we've come a long
Yeah,
ways, I think, in the last 30, 40 years when it comes to that.
definitely. Yeah, it's so handy to have things like PHP now where you can drop in dynamics. I remember back in the day when I was using what was it, Netscape Composer to build websites. Uh, that was back in '99, maybe.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, it was one of those things where companies would have 30 to 300 pages, and the header with the navigation bar and the logo had to be hard coded on every single page because every single page was HTML. So if you wanted to change a link on there, you'd have to go through all of those pages and change the link on all of them. So it's more like a find replace sort of deal. But now we have, as you know, dynamic headers, which you can just drop in there, change one time, that's the other beautiful thing about Elementor is you can set up your overarching template structure, your framework of the website, and it automatically pulls all of that in for you on every page that you're editing, unless you ask it not to.
Yeah.
So it's just we've come such a long way, and I think even in terms of speed, which is a huge roadblock with WordPress, due to what we were talking about before, heavy themes, heavy plugins. Even in the last 5 years, speed has become less of an issue, thanks to modern browsing optimizations and things like Chrome and Firefox. Just better handling of websites in general, and developers kind of staying on top of stuff with plugin standards and theme standards. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, discussing what types of plugins and themes you should install.
Right.
With kind of keeping in mind developer activity. So, making sure that these things are being updated regularly to be compliant with.
Well, that's right. And there's really kind of the two topics I want to touch on. One is, of course, website development, right? That process of developing a high performing website, not only from the user's experience, but also just from the performance of the site, right? The speed, all the other things that are really important. And then the other part of the equation is the maintenance side, which I think is just as critical, but many times overlooked. I think many times clients think once their site's up and running, that they've made the major investment and it's time just now to run with it. And I think they overlook a lot when it comes to ongoing maintenance, and we'll touch on that. But let's start with new websites. I know, we've been involved with some projects, and there's the whole design side certainly, and understanding the industry and the user interface. But when clients come to you, when really putting this all together, what are some of the critical things that you're looking at and that you're sharing with clients as far as developing an effective website?
Yeah, that's a good question. So starting out, I think the biggest thing is if it's a brand new idea and they don't really have any kind of framework for or hard plan in place for like they know what they want, they know what they want to do, they kind of know what the content's going to be, but they don't really know what the mechanics are going to be. I think the biggest thing that I start with is, well, who's your audience and what is your main goal? What are the top like 3 to 5 things that you're trying to accomplish with this? Because that really sets the stage for understanding what they might need in terms of frameworks, templates, design, UX, UI, and once you kind of have that idea, then you kind of know what to deliver. And at that point, it kind of gets a little bit more technical. We discuss things like hosting and content and assets, where all that's going to live and how it flows, and how that's going to be delivered to us so that we can properly insert it into the site. But that's pretty much where we start, and then it evolves pretty quickly from there, especially when we've got sort of the main concept down and we've kind of clicked and jived with the idea, and there's good communication between us and the client, so that it flows pretty
Yeah.
seamlessly.
So, some of the, I guess, particulars around the website development, we talked about plugins, right? At one point we were just putting in all these plugins, and then I started realizing, started talking to people that, hey, your site can get pretty heavy if you get too many plugins, or you get the wrong plugins, and it can really start affecting the speed and performance of your site. And is that something that is critical on not only the plugins you select, but how many you have when it comes to your website?
Yes. The biggest rule of thumb, I would say, is the fewer the plugins, the better. And sometimes that can't be helped. Sometimes you need multiple things happening in multiple places, and pages can be vastly different in what you're trying to do. One page could have an interactive form. The other one might have a gallery of some kind, and then your homepage has a slider, and those are three different plugins managing that stuff. So it's a little bit tough to put a specific number on how many plugins you should and shouldn't have, because it really depends on where the website lives in terms of hosting. Whether you're running a VPS with a lot of oomph behind it, or whether you're using shared hosting and you can really only support maybe like 15 plugins max. But yeah, it does matter. And if you have a developer, it's best to discuss with them your goals and kind of go through why you have each of these plugins in mind, because they might be able to integrate that right into the theme for you without you having to add additional plugins that you need to be checking regularly for updates, maintenance, security, all that stuff.
Now, the idea with these builders and plugins obviously is that you don't necessarily have to do custom coding. I'm assuming that there are times, I know that you've done it with some of our sites, where you do bring in some custom coding, and what's the do's and don'ts when it comes to custom coding when you bring that into a client's site?
I think the biggest one is if you're custom coding something for a client specifically around how content flows on a page, it can be really easy to, let's say the client wanted an interactive 3D grid system with like pods of content in rows with 3 columns, for example. If you find that you need to custom code that, then are you custom coding the entire thing? Are you putting that content inside of those grids? If that's the case, then suddenly the client can't access the contents anymore. They have to go into the theme's functions.php file, which nobody knows what the heck that is. Right. And they have to find where the content is and change it right there. And that's probably going to be impossible for most clients out there, because our job is to make it so they don't have to do that. So that's one of the biggest don'ts. Another one is putting all of your code in one basket. It's really easy to just kind of drop everything that you're custom coding into the themes functions.php file. This gets a little bit technical, but in WordPress, you can either throw all of that custom code into the functions.php file in your child theme, or you can build smaller plugins, or you can build, now I know we've talked about not having a bunch of plugins installed, but if you're coding it and you have a couple of different things that you want to do inside of a single plugin, you can go ahead and do that without affecting the child theme. And so it's good to modularize your code, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, interesting. Another big topic when it comes to websites is speed, right? If your site is slow, it can really affect not only the performance of the information being shared, but quite honestly, the potential of losing clients when they're on your site, or prospective clients coming to your site. How do you address speed from the beginning when you're designing the site and determining, again, plugins and what all is involved? And I know images is a big part of this too. Sometimes, and I fell into this early on, where I'm putting these large images in without optimizing the images, and that seemed to really affect the speed. So I know there's various aspects that affect it. What's your approach when it comes to speed with new websites?
I've got basically a 5-point check for that, and it comes down to hosting, images, caching, plugin bloat, and clean code. So that's kind of a checklist, an overall overarching sort of checklist for approaching the initial framework. So one of the most important is what we've talked about before, which is hosting. If you're kind of being a little tight with your budget and you pay for, $12 or $25 a month hosting, you might want to take it easy on things like additional plugins, heavy stuff, heavy themes. So if there's a little bit of latitude for, great hosting, then you can start to do pretty heavier things. You can start to look at more of a corporate framework rather than relying on a bunch of pages and posts. You can start to do things like custom content and what we were talking about before, custom sliders and custom 3D grids and all of that. So you mentioned images, and that's a huge one. Really, people forget that they're uploading a 3,000 by 3,000 photograph with 300 DPI, and that happens to be an 18 megabyte picture. It's going to affect the load time. So, I mean, with modern browsers like we were talking about before, and faster internet connections, just in general, with your local ISP, it tends to be less of an issue. But we're looking at right now in 2025, I believe it's about 60 to 65% of traffic is coming from mobile phones. And so if you're not connected directly to a Wi-Fi network with 300 Mbps all the way up to two TVs of speed, then you're loading a website on your phone with an LTE connection, with a 5G connection, and that 12 megabyte photo might cause the page to not load for 12 seconds, and you've lost their visit within 3 or 4 seconds.
Well, that ties into another critical part, I think, when it comes to website is mobile optimization, right? Not only the speed, but just the way it's designed for mobile use versus the way it's designed for desktop use, right? And
Yes.
What's your approach when it comes to that, when you're putting together and you're optimizing for mobile, in addition to the images that we're talking about here, just the design itself?
Yes. So it's important to minimize as much as possible. One of the cool things about Elementor, the theme we were just talking about, that theme framework we were just talking about, is when you're editing a page, at the top, there's 3 little icons. One is your desktop view, which is the default that you'll be editing. And then there's an iPad view and then a phone view. As you click each of those, it shows you exactly what the site is going to look on those platforms. So at that point, you are able to kind of truncate your content just a little bit, pull it back, and start to hide elements in that editing page experience. You can hit like a little visibility icon, and that will omit it from the mobile view. And so that's kind of what we try to do is work with the client to understand how heavy these pages need to be on mobile versus desktop.
Well, and the reality is it's almost like designing 2 websites if you do it right? Because you're really looking at designing not only for user interface on mobile, but again, just the efficiency of the site and how well it runs and the links and the layout. And the ones that I've seen, what we really focus on, we really approach it as 2 different websites, right? Your mobile, and then even though there's some overlap, it really, if you really put a strategy behind it, it really comes out to really two different websites.
Exactly. Yes, and that's kind of a method that some developers use, which is a mobile first experience. So they'll actually design the website for mobile before even touching a desktop version. I think that's helpful for things like mobile responsiveness, speed, and so on, like we've been talking about.
So let's jump into the maintenance mode of things. When clients have issues with it, sounds like a lot of what you do is kind of the troubleshooting maintenance side of the business. Are clients coming to you that you've created their website, or have websites already been created and they're coming to you for that service? Let's start with how your service is structured when it comes to maintenance and support, and then some of the critical areas that you typically deal with.
Right, right. So the biggest thing that I do by default, pretty much with every site that I work on, is I'll go in and update the plugins to make sure everything's working okay after the update. So, did anything break? After creating a backup, always create a backup first. After creating a backup and then upgrading or updating their plugins, has anything snapped? And then, if it has, pretty rarely, fortunately, but if it has, then you have to go in and figure out what the culprit and usually it's something to do with the theme not playing nice with the plugin, because typically if you have all of your most common WordPress plugins up to date, they do play well with each other. So back up and then go in and update the plugins, double check the theme, make sure that that's up to date as well.
And how about WordPress itself? I always get these notices that WordPress is updating, and does that happen automatically, or do you have to literally go in and update the WordPress program as well?
Yeah, so that's a setting in your WordPress dashboard. I believe it's under settings and maintenance. I forget exactly where it is, but basically you can check a box that says update WordPress for me whenever. So, but for the most part, people don't click that because they don't want to wake up one morning and find that WordPress is updated and their site's broken and has been down with a 404 error or a 500 error for 12 hours.
Right.
Who knows? You can't really put a price tag on that. So yes, I think it's important to make sure that your WordPress core is up to date. And so that's kind of a 3-point check is the core itself, and then your themes, and then your plugins. And then it's important to go through and see what's being actively maintained. If you have 40 plugins and 12 of them have not been updated by the developer of the plugin for 12 years, then it's very likely that there's a security hole in that. So a lot of security companies will tell you that keeping your plugins up to date is the best way to keep your site secure. And they're not wrong. But keeping plugins up to date doesn't necessarily mean that it's the latest version. You might have the latest version of the plugin installed, but the latest version was created in 2008. So that's going to have a bunch of holes.
Well, we're kind of running into that now with a client, right? Where they have a program and the plugin is having some issues. And we were just talking about, it may be best just to kind of literally go a different route here because of the plugin, and because there's just a lot of issues and constantly trying to fix it, right? And again, I think a lot of folks think once they have the plugin in, they're kind of set, so we should be fine. And it really, and many times, is not the case.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, when we talk about security and maintenance, is it safe to say they kind of go hand in hand? I mean, to really have a secure site and to really have a site that has a good maintenance program tied to it?
Yes. Maintenance is primarily, in my mind, security and speed. Those are the biggest things, because if you have, they say if you don't have your health, you have nothing. It's the same with your site. If there's no security there and there's malware that can be inserted at any moment with outdated plugins, then speed doesn't matter. But you can have the most up-to-date secure site in the world, and if it takes 12 seconds to load the site, then nobody's going to visit the site, and that defeats the entire purpose. So yes, they do go hand in hand, and those are both things that you have to put a pretty heavy focus on when you're hiring someone for maintenance or doing maintenance yourself.
So, Michael, can you give our audience an example of a site or a client that came to you that was in pretty bad shape and kind of the process that you went through and what you had to do to, I'll say, get it up and running at a high level?
Yes, we had one client that came to us with a site that was running on cheap hosting. They actually had, I think, 60 plus plugins installed, and it was taking 12 to
60,
15.
60?
60, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, I think this was back in 2018. It was taking 12 to 15 seconds to load. The first thing I did was I migrated them to better hosting. And then I worked with them directly over the course of a couple of days to cut the plugin count in half, which is, I mean, it's still pretty heavy, but way better than what was going on. We rebuilt some of the heavier functionality in a more efficient way. And that kind of ties into what I was saying before, where you can streamline a lot of these processes and functionalities with some simple PHP scripts. As long as it's something that's kind of in the background and something that doesn't need to be actively maintained by the owner of the site. So, yeah, at the end of that, we had a site that loaded in under 2 seconds and ranked way better on Google almost immediately. It was blinding. Just the speed at which Google picked it up and the page loads came in, and we had better caching in the back end. We had caching through a service called Cloudflare, and yeah, it was it's right as rain. After that, the client was just thrilled to not have 60 plugins and have a site that was loading.
Yeah, yeah. Well, 2 points I want to ask you about within that, and Cloudflare is one. I'm gonna come back to Cloudflare, but in that case, with the speed and really how you address that, um, is that something that becomes ongoing for you? What I'm trying to get at is with a maintenance package, let's say, is that something that you're checking on a regular basis and work? Is that one of the key areas that you're focused on, or is that just one of these things? Occasionally, you check a site and it's slow, and you got to fix it.
Yeah, so both is the answer. You can check kind of the overall caching solutions on a website, and you can see what's already there. You can see what's loaded. There's a plugin actually that developers install on websites that shows the CPU usage and memory usage right on the top admin bar, and that gives you a pretty good indication of which plugins are kind of dragging the most. So that's where you can get more like granular in your fixes. And I like to look for broad strokes improvements that we can do very quickly. Your 80-20 rule. So we go in and we run scripts like that, and it tells us, maybe gravity forms is slowing down the site. Maybe we can cut that out and just put a simple form on the only page on their site that has a contact form. You don't need that heavy of a suite to put one form on your site. So stuff like that, you can get really granular, and you can start going page by page and optimizing images, downloading your images, resizing them, re-uploading them. But there's a lot of overall stuff that you can do to speed up the site. And that comes down to, yes, make sure everything is up to date. Make sure your PHP version on your server is up to date, so it doesn't just come down to WordPress, but also the container that it's in. So making sure that the latest software is installed server side can speed up your site pretty substantially. So server, install a caching plugin if you don't have one, and make sure that the caching plugin is indexing your pages as they load. So after you install a caching plugin, you would manually go to, your top pages and make sure that they're loading a lot faster. And at that point, when you load that page, it triggers in the plugin usually and saves it in an index. And so at that point, you're looking at, oftentimes 20 to 30% faster pages just from doing that one thing. But you start to do improvements like that, and then, like we were just talking about, Cloudflare on top of that, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a moment. Then you're looking at getting an amazing speed boost without having to touch any of your pages at all.
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize, I mean, the speed is important for user interface, but it's also, and you touched on it, when Google is indexing and when they're looking for the rankings and or when they're ranking sites and pulling up, that's one of the criteria. My understanding is speed. If they're seeing sites that are performing very poorly or slowly, they kind of ding you for it, right? And
Yes,
because their intent is to make sure user interface is positive as well. So it can affect your ranking as well from an SEO standpoint, correct?
absolutely. It's 100%. Google doesn't want people clicking their links and not loading a page.
Right.
That's a deadline.
Yeah.
So even though it has nothing to do with Google, it reflects on the portal because they have a
Right.
link that's essentially feeling like it's broken.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does affect it. And, even without Cloudflare, which is a CDN that we keep talking about and not really explaining what it is. Basically, Cloudflare it's an all-in-one tool suite that is not installed on your server or even in WordPress. When you buy a domain name, you have, yourdomain.com. And usually the DNS for that domain links to your server directly. So you have these two layers. Cloudflare comes in at a third layer between the domain and the hosting, and it acts as a filter. And what that filter does is it enables you to do things like additional firewalls, better content caching, CDN, which is your content delivery network. The way that works is it regionalizes your content. So there might be a node in the UK, and you're loading the site in the UK, so it would connect to that node instead of going all the way back to your server, which might be in the US, for example. So it does a lot of handy stuff, and I am very much only scratching the surface. It does a million different things, and it's super helpful. But loading quickly is very important for SEO to begin with. But if you have something like Cloudflare installed as well, Google loves that. Google is pretty much hand in hand with Cloudflare. So they love anyone who has. So, by the way, you can set up Cloudflare free. They do have a free tier, and it does everything that you need.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and you've really turned me on to Cloudflare, and now we're moving all of our clients there. And as you mentioned, just the free version alone has its benefits. And and then if you decide you want to take it to another level, you're already set up, and then you can upgrade, if you will. And it's fairly easy to set up. It's not really overly complicated, but man, it really brings a lot of benefits to the table when it comes to security and like you're talking about with speed.
Yes, 100%. It does a lot of other things too. It'll monitor your performance. It can be set up to send you notifications if there's problems on pages. It has a built-in firewall. We touched on that briefly, but a lot of sites get hit with a DDoS attack, which is called a denial of service attack. It's where your server gets bombarded with a bunch of visits, talking like 300,000 visits every second.
Wow.
And that gets filtered out by Cloudflare. That alone is worth installing.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, this is great. We've talked about a lot of different things here, all important stuff. But what are a few simple things that most clients can do themselves to keep their site in good shape?
So what we've talked about is just make sure that your backups are in place. It's so important to have a daily backup of at least your database. Your files you can back up, maybe once or twice a week. I wouldn't go too much further beyond that. And a lot of modern hosting companies will automatically back up your site for you on a daily basis in the morning. So just make sure that that's happening. And then just log into your admin panel. They're going to tell you there's a bunch of red bubbles that say you need to do stuff. So pay attention to what it's asking you to do. And if it says, update your plugins, then maybe you can do that or have your developer do that. If you're looking to install more plugins, maybe check with your developer first to make sure that they can't, do this for you quickly without you having to add 60 plugins. So that's sort of a higher level broad strokes thing you can do to keep things running smoothly. And then I would say the last thing after you've gone and made your made sure your backups are in place, you've updated everything, you've maybe visited a few pages to make sure everything works and that it's still working quickly. If it's slow, then maybe look into some caching solutions, which there are WordPress plugins for that. You can quickly install a caching plugin and get that little boost of speed without having to get a professional in there to configure all that for you. And then as a last step, I would say go to your hosting and just pull up a live chat with them and say, hey, am I on the latest container? Is my PHP up to date? Is the software, I would say, ask them if the software on the server is up to date. So that was like 4 things that you can do, today to really improve the security and speed of the site.
Absolutely. And of course, if you don't want to do any of that yourself, you can hire somebody like Apex Rush to help out and kind of take control of that overall maintenance and making sure everything's healthy and running properly. So with that, Michael, is there anything that I didn't ask you think it might be beneficial for our audience when it comes to websites?
I would say that the biggest thing that I can think of right now is websites can be a little bit too confusing. If you have an idea of the content you want to add on the site, it's worth, at the very least, running it through something like ChatGPT and asking, hey, does the flow of this content make sense? Take a screenshot of your site and say, hey, is my above the fold experience something that would keep people on this site? And if you find that your bounce rate is pretty high, then you might want to get a professional in there to double check the UI and the UX and make sure that visitors are having the best experience and that they're hooked in quickly. I think, beyond that, I think, the tech side of things, we probably nerded out a little bit too much. But I'm hoping that you guys got something from this and that you can take quick steps to speed things up.
Yeah, no, this is great, Michael. I appreciate your time. If you all like this episode, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone in your network who's thinking about launching or fixing their website. Michael, if somebody needs to get a hold of you or Apex Rush, where do they go?
Apexrush.com is the best way to get a hold of us. There's a form at the bottom of the page. Just shoot us an email, and then if that doesn't work or you're on the go and you can't go to the site, contact@apexrush.com.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for listening to the Donovan Digital Podcast, where we help you build trust, connect with your audience, and grow your brand in the built environment. We'll catch you next time.